Welcome back, and welcome to Wing Commander Mike Bracken, the spokesman of NATO's Operation Unified Protector, who joins us from Naples to provide us with this week's operational update. The Secretary General will be in Naples tomorrow to meet the commander of Operation Unified Protector, General Charlie Bouchard, and his staff. He will want to thank all the servicemen and women from allies and partners for a very successful operation. And I think he'll obviously also discuss the progress of the air and maritime campaigns enforcing United Nations Security Council resolutions to support and protect the people of Libya. Today, there was a strong agreement around the Council table on several key points. We are continuing to successfully fulfill the mandate. The arms embargo is effective, the no-fly zone is effective, and there are no coordinated attacks by regime forces against civilians. Where we see an attack or the threat of attack, we take it out, exactly as mandated by UN Security Council Resolution 1973. This is also an extraordinarily precise operation, showing utmost respect for human life and great care about civilian infrastructure. So NATO and our partners are doing the job they were mandated to do. That's the military job. We will continue to do it until the three clear military goals have been met: an end to all attacks against civilians, the withdrawal of all regime forces to bases, and full and unhindered humanitarian access. But clearly, the overall aim cannot be fulfilled by military means alone. We're helping to create the conditions for a political solution. But that is not NATO's job. The main responsibility for political guidance rests with the International Contact Group, and the Contact Group will meet in Istanbul next Friday under the co-chairmanship of Turkey and the United Arab Emirates. The Secretary General will represent NATO, which, as you know, is part of the Contact Group. This is the fourth such meeting, and we expect it to give a critical impetus to efforts to reach a political solution and to speed up preparations for a post-conflict Libya in accordance with the legitimate aspirations of the people of Libya. And with that, over to you, Mike, in Naples for the operational update.
Thank you, Oana. Good afternoon to Brussels, and good afternoon to those of you who have joined us here today in Naples. Our last operational update was held on the 28th of June by the Commander, Lieutenant General Charles Bouchard. Since that time, the situation in Libya from east to west continues to be complex and in places very dynamic. Yet we continue to achieve our mission to protect the people of Libya. Success in this campaign will be measured by the removal of threats to the civilian population. We have degraded Gaddafi's military capacity to the point that he is no longer capable of running any major offensive operation. Pro-Gaddafi forces, however, are still able to launch limited operations and use intimidation tactics, which shows clear intent to harm civilians, as we've seen with the continued indiscriminate shelling of cities and towns and the use of mosques and civilian neighbourhoods from which to launch such attacks. Let's now have a look at the situation from east to west. Bracken is the cornerstone of the pro-Gaddafi forces campaign in eastern Libya. Ongoing operations aim to protect the civilian population and help facilitate the safe road delivery of humanitarian assistance from Benghazi to the coastal towns such as Ras Lanuf and Sirte, which remain under the control of pro-Gaddafi forces. There are occasional skirmishes between Bracken and Ajdabia, and we are monitoring them closely with NATO intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets. Yesterday in Bracken, NATO forces struck military refueling equipment to deny pro-Gaddafi forces access to fuel in the Bracken region. These precision strikes will limit the ability of pro-Gaddafi forces to threaten Libyan civilians and significantly degrade the logistical support for Gaddafi's campaign in eastern Libya. In Misrata, pro-Gaddafi forces have shelled the outskirts of the city several times in the past week, and fighting between the two forces is ongoing. Around Tawa, Tawa, 40 kilometers south of Misrata, there have been skirmishes between pro- and anti-Gaddafi forces. It appears that the boundary of fighting remains in the Daphnia-Zlintan area, about 25 kilometers west of Misrata. Currently, anti-Gaddafi forces are assessed to have gained some ground, but the situation is constantly changing. NATO forces are monitoring the situation very closely and engaging military targets that threaten civilians, whilst minimizing the risk to the local population. 3 months ago, Misrata was a city under siege. Now, pro-Gaddafi forces have been pushed out of the city and people are returning to their homes. International and non-government organizations are working to clear the dangers left by the remains of unexploded ordnance that has been put there by the pro-Gaddafi forces and the landmines in and around the city. The port remains open and humanitarian aid shipments are frequently arriving. To the west, cities such as Zawiya and Al-Zawiya remain under pro-Gaddafi control, and forces loyal to Gaddafi are likely to preventing the local population from uprising. In the Berber Highlands and the area of the Nafusa Mountains, we've seen over the past week NATO's round-the-clock operations resulting in the removal of more than 60 military targets. In and around Garion, about 80 kilometers south of Tripoli, NATO's air operations have hit 18 military targets, including a tunneled military complex in Wadi, southeast of Tripoli. This complex has been built into the mountains and was used to resupply pro-Gaddafi forces, tanks, and other military vehicles. All strikes on munitions and support facilities were conducted using precision-guided weapons. NATO continues to monitor this area closely and will continue to use all necessary measures to protect these communities. There has been fighting in and around the towns of Kikla, Nulut, Zintan, and Yafran, but they are all assessed to be under anti-Gaddafi control. Anti-Gaddafi forces look to have the initiative and are able to launch successful attacks against pro-Gaddafi forces. Progress is significant, and NATO will see this mission through. We've flown over 14,000 sorties, with strikes hitting their intended targets with a very high degree of accuracy. The skies over Libya are well protected, and the no-fly zone is being enforced. Hundreds of these sorties have been conducted by attack helicopters under NATO command and control. These have been fully integrated into NATO's operations for over a month. They have been a true force multiplier with the added flexibility to engage military equipment and regime forces from Braga to west of Tripoli. Attack helicopters have destroyed over 300 military targets, such as armed vehicles, main battle tanks, radar systems, and military facilities used by pro-Gaddafi forces to threaten the civilian population. Missions conducted by attack helicopters are totally integrated into the operation and are fully supported by the wide range of NATO intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets. And there's even evidence that suggests that the sheer presence of attack helicopters has also contributed to the reducing of the threat of attacks against civilians. At sea, the embargo remains totally effective. We've boarded 148 ships, hailed more than 1,650, and denied passage to 9 vessels because their cargo was not compliant with the United Nations Security Council 1970. Our measurement of success is the removal of threats to the Libyan people. Throughout Libya, there is free movement of personnel and humanitarian aid. The mission is being achieved and maintained. However, Gaddafi has proved by continuing to field his forces and indiscriminately shelling civilians that his intent has not diminished. His forces are rearming, regrouping, and fighting in places such as Kikla, Misrata, and Daphnia. If NATO was to step away, Gaddafi's intent to harm civilians would remain, and thousands of lives would be put at risk. That is why the mission must continue. NATO remains fully engaged, and as long as pro-Gaddafi forces continue to plan and launch